Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? If you could just write in the chat if you can hear me, that'd be great.
I'm on a meeting.
Hey, Paul, that's great. I'll take that as a yes. I'm hoping the rest of you can hear me as well. So thank you all for joining and welcome to the last session that we have of the learning series. So in this 10-week series, we've been looking at learning in disaster and emergency preparedness. We've been discussing issues on key themes that have arisen in the sector, and then we have other sessions that have been a bit more practical. And we hope you've enjoyed them all. And if you've missed anyone, I just wanted to remind you that they've all been recorded and stored on the learning platform, where you could either revisit them or listen to any one that you might have missed. In today's webinar, we will be exploring the merits of online learning systems, and we will share our experience of building platforms. So that will be the learning platform and also the Digital Resource Center from the National Humanitarian Network in Pakistan. The session will be based around 2 presentations, followed by a discussion, and then we will leave some time at the end for questions and answers from you guys. If you have any questions during the presentation or during the discussions, then feel free to write them in the chat, and we will keep a record of them and bring them up later. Alternatively, you could also wait until the end of the webinar until we get to the Q&A session, and you could ask your questions then. Again, you could write it in the chat, or you could raise your hand and we'll see it and then ask you to give your input. If you experience any technical difficulties during the session, so if you can't hear anything or you can't see anything, you'll be able to do a private message to Daria Markek, who's joining me here today as a co-host, and she will then be able to help you out on sort of a separate chat, and hopefully we'll be able to solve any issues then. So before we start, I think we'd start with some introductions. My name is Ida Ågenäs. I'm the Communications and Learning Officer for the Disasters and Emergency Preparedness Program Learning Project. And we're based here at Action Against Hunger UK. We're then also the ones that have been developing the Disaster Preparedness Learning Platform, which we will be looking at a bit later. So I will be delivering the first presentation today and then lead a discussion later with my guest speaker. I'm also supported, like I said, by my colleague Daria Markek on the technical side of things. And our guest speaker today is Sana Zulfikar from the National Humanitarian Network in Pakistan. And she has joined us to talk about the Digital Resource Center. And I'll let her briefly introduce herself. Hello, Sana.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ida. My name is Sana Zulfikar, and I'm working as National Humanitarian Coordinator at National Humanitarian Network Pakistan. I have joined NHN since 2014, and till now I'm working very much engaged with NHN. Today for this session, my fellow colleague Mohammad Humayun is also with me. He is Digital Resource Center Coordinator. So after the session, if any question is relevant to him, he will definitely address those questions on the technical side.
That's great, Sana. Thank you. And welcome to you as well, Mohammed. We look forward to hearing from you. Before we get into the systems, I thought we should talk a bit about what we mean when we say online learning systems. in our sector and just in general, the working world, we are increasingly using technology to help us in our humanitarian work, so that we can combat the whole issue with a lot of remote working. Our teams are quite spread out and we work more and more internationally. So we're using technology to keep in touch with people and to work remotely. And we're now also using this more and more in a way to share the knowledge and the learning that are coming out of programs, both on national, regional and global levels. And that is a bit what we will be looking at now, the different systems that are being created and developed, and what we have here today. So we will look a bit more on the practical side of how you actually go about building an online learning system, then taking the example of the learning platform and the digital research center. So hopefully if you are either just interested in this, or if you're in the process of doing something similar yourself, then you could take some of the recommendations and learnings that have come out of what we've done so far. Right, let me start with, if I can get there, to the next slide. Right. So what is the learning platform? Let's start with that. Some of you might know it very well already. Some of you might not know what I'm talking about at all. So the learning platform is an online space to facilitate the sharing of knowledge and learning between preparedness actors. And we've created it to allow this to happen at all levels across the humanitarian sector. The way it does this is that we have different sections of the site. So we have a learning library for uploaded learnings. We have tools and guidance, which looks at operational guidance, but also guidance on how to capture and share learning. There's a more informal forum where you can have discussions with practitioners from across the sector, and also a directory where you can find other projects, practitioners, and also events near you. So you can go check that out. Now, this platform, what we have today, is quite different from what we started out with. We built this platform because it was one of the outputs of our project. It was one of the things that we were going to deliver for the Disasters and Emergencies Preparedness Program. So this is a 3-year program with 14 projects. And it started out as more of a space for the program staff. So an internal space, you could say, for sharing information and maybe project information and not so much learning. That was sort of the premise of it. But the more we started looking into it, and I will get a bit more into what I mean with that, the more we started exploring what it is that we should be creating and what it is that people wanted and actually needed, the scope of this platform changed significantly. So it went from being more of an internal information platform to being a more external platform that reached a larger number of actors at different levels, and with a stronger focus on horizontal, peer-to-peer, and country-to-country sharing of knowledge and learning, rather than the more top-down information sharing that it started out as. But to get to the point that we have today, it was a long process, not just of building, but of consultations and trial and error. And I'd like to take you through what we did to end up where we are today, so that maybe it could help you guys on the way as well. Struggling a bit with my PowerPoint here, sorry. There we go. So building a platform. And it's all about knowing what you need. So we started out with an idea of what we wanted to build. But what we found out pretty quickly when we started talking to people who are more experienced with creating platforms in a variety of sector was that you shouldn't start with the idea of what you want. You should start with figuring out the problem that you're actually trying to solve. And it became quite clear when we were talking to developers, and we started engaging with a software consultant as well, that we weren't actually aware of the problems that our colleagues were facing, and we weren't clear on how the system we had in mind would address those problems. So basically, we'd started at the wrong end of the stick. We had an idea of an internal platform that would serve an information need. When it turned out, when we started talking to our end users and primary audience, that wasn't actually what they needed. They had information storing systems, but what they didn't have was a space where they could reach out to people, talk to peers in either their own countries or other countries, and figure out what they were actually learning, what issues they were experiencing, and how they were tackling it. And that came out as the key issue and the problem that we needed to solve. So it was all about identifying what we think we need and what is needed, identifying who we thought would be using this, and our focus shifted quite clearly to more the national and regional level, that this is where the need was biggest and where we could address it with building this platform. And then it was all about putting together, so what we did was putting together a prototype with these new assumptions. We did sort of a clickable pretend website with solutions addressing the needs that we'd identified. And we took it to a number of people, a number of stakeholders in the different projects, and asked them to try it out, and testing our assumptions that way. And I would say, be prepared to change your plans, because what we realized the way that we use websites is not necessarily the way people in other countries or other contexts use websites. And that was probably one of the most interesting things we realized, because we'd made this prototype, which was logical for us, but was not logical for many other people. And the beauty of this phase, in the exploration phase, is that you haven't actually built something yet, and you haven't coded anything yet. It's all just sort of pretty pictures on a slide, so you can change it all around to better suit your needs. What's also important to know in this phase is that you need to start cutting back on what you're creating already. So you can't do everything, and you shouldn't do everything with this website. And through testing, you can figure out what people are drawn to and what people just either don't seem very interested in, or they actually don't think it's necessary because they use something else for it, or it's not something they would use. And this is the phase where you can explore all these things and start narrowing it down. And another point I've put here is that know that you can disagree with what is being proposed. And what I mean by that is that the developers you might be working with, or the designers you'll be working with in this phase, might have a certain look in mind. They might already have tried something out that they think will suit you. But if you don't like it, just let them know, because this is a time where you can make the changes you want seen on the final product. Now, the next thing I want to point out is you need to know your limitations when you're building something like this. We usually work with quite strict, quite set budgets and timelines in our sector. you need to know what that is and then figure out what you can do within that budget. So for us, we had quite a big budget compared to many others embarking on this thing, but it still wasn't enough to do everything or to do everything in the way that we might have wanted it. So you start having to compromise between, do you want to build it very big and shiny, or do you want limited functionality? And you have to start figuring out what is right for you and your needs. You have to figure out the limitations of your scope. So what are you mandated to achieve? What are you meant to be doing and delivering with this project? And what resources do you have to address this? So it might be that you have a very clear plan and very clear deliverables from your project, that you're meant to do a certain amount of thing with this platform. You're meant to have a certain amount of functionalities. But in the testing phase, what you found was that these aren't the right functionalities to address the need of your users. And therefore, you might be able to go back and renegotiate those so that the scope of what you're delivering is actually fit for purpose, and it's also the most cost-effective thing that you're left with. Know the limitations of your audience. And with that, I mean, in the sense of what will work for the broad audience that you're addressing or the niche audience that you're addressing. So it might be that for a big social media platform, you can be very, very innovative and come up with something very high tech. Or if you have a very techie group of people who want to spend time on figuring out new systems and want to spend time on learning new things. Or you might have an audience, which is what we found, where they're just too busy to learn new things. You have a big workload and that's your main priority. And your main priority is not learning how to use a new website, even though it might look flashy. And if that is your parameters, then you have to stick within them and make something that is probably more user-friendly for a large group of people. What we found as one of our biggest limitations was time. So like I said, this is a 3-year program we were meant to deliver this platform for. But by the time we'd started, we were halfway through. And building a platform in the short amount of time that we needed to build the platform was something that quite a few of the developers that we talked to, they weren't necessarily prepared for that. It was a very quick turnaround, both the exploration phase and the building phase. And it was doable, but it was definitely something that we needed to take into account, both impacting what we delivered, but also impacting the way we delivered it. And one thing to bring into the next thing we're going to look at, which is approach, is the limitations of the system or the technical solution you decide to go with. So with that, I mean, when you decide to build a platform, you could build something completely from scratch, which is custom built and coded exactly to your needs, or you could build it on an existing technical solution and platform. And this will impact the limitations of your systems. So if you have the budget and the time to build something that is custom made for you, then there usually won't be that many limitations of what the system can deliver. However, this is usually takes a lot more time. It is definitely more expensive. So what we found was that it would at least be twice as much as going with an existing technical solution. But the benefits are you will get exactly what you want. You won't be hammered by the system's limitations. So some online systems will not be able to deliver exactly the functionality that you want in the exact right way that you wanted it, but it will most likely be able to do something quite similar. So it's a balancing act between figuring out what you need and if it's okay to use a technical solution that's already existing, and then you can alter it to fit your need, or if you really need something that is so out of the ordinary and so custom that you need to build it yourself. In our case, we were between those two options. So we could go completely custom, or we could go with an existing technical solution. And in the end, we had to weigh up the cost versus customization and the ability to add functionalities or change functionalities or adapt the site. And there was a lot more room for us to do that when we were going for an existing technical solution like WordPress, which is what we've been using, rather than a custom build, because we just wouldn't have the budget to make those big changes on a custom build site. So when you decide on a supplier, you've already done your value proposition, you know what you want, you know the specification and scope of work of your platform, and you just need someone to build it. So you'd usually put this together, do a request for proposal and publicize it or send it to identify suppliers, and they would then come back with sort of the solution they would go for to address what it is that you need. And you'd have to then decide on if what they're offering, if it will actually satisfy your need, both technically, and also if it will be within your budget, if this is something that you can go for. I guess that's definitely the bottom line. Can they deliver it, and can they deliver it within cost? But what you also need to look at then is their flexibility. So is there room in the proposal or the solution that they're offering to make changes along the way? Or if they can't make any changes within their quote, is there room in your budget to add new functionalities? Also, do they understand what your request is, and do they understand the sector? So what we found is that they're not very familiar with the development or humanitarian sectors, and there's limitations in our sector that they just haven't encountered before. So if they're maybe used to working for big corporate companies or retailers, and they create websites for those types of users, they won't have to think that much about the connectivity issues that we often experience in rural areas, or the language barriers that we experience, or, like I mentioned, all the different kinds of of computer literacy that we have in our sector. So these are things that they might not think that much about, might not be that aware about, and you can often tell when these are the questions they have in their minds, or if these are things that they wouldn't consider. It would also be an idea to look at their previous experience and their proof of work. So what have they created before? Do you like the way it looks? If to you their previous work isn't impressive, or just isn't something that you find to be what you need for your solution, then they might not be the right supplier for you. And finally, who can you work with? So when I say that, it's obviously down to what timeline are they proposing, what is the cost, and where are they based? Are they something that it's easy for you to get a hold of, or will this be more difficult because it will be a remote working relationship? But another thing that we found to be very important is also personalities, in the sense of, are these someone that you can get along with? Because you will be working with them very closely. And if you already experience in the interview phase that you're finding this difficult, then it will definitely get harder. So you have to put that into the mix as well. And lastly, how open do they seem to change? We experienced this just by accident, in a way that from the time we'd sent out our request for proposal until the time that we had the interviews, we'd actually made some changes to what we wanted. And we just asked them that in the interviews, how they would incorporate it and how they felt about it. And then you could then sort of gauge from their reply if that was something that they would handle well, or if any changes might cause issues in the future. So it's just a nice sort of point to note when you go through that process. So now, if you've already decided on your developers, we're going then to development and the launch. And I've started with have low expectations. Even the best developers requires micromanagement. And with that, it's not obviously not to say that they're not technically competent in any way. Even the best developers will require micromanagement or a lot of management, because firstly, they won't fully understand the context that you're working in and the needs that you have, because only you can understand your program fully. And like I mentioned before, they usually don't work within our sector. So there are things that you just need to keep reminding them of or explaining, because they're just not coming from your point of view. Also, keep reminding them that you're there. Keep reminding them that you need them to deliver on certain things at certain timelines, because you will rarely be their only client, which means they have other people to please, they have other work to do. And if you don't speak up, then you can easily sort of end up going further and further down the to-do list, which isn't what you want, especially not if you have limited time to deliver what it is that you're trying to deliver. I'd also want to say, remember to be organized on your side, because you will have the timeline and you will have an overview of when the different functionalities are meant to be delivered and go live. But don't expect the developers to tell you that they're going live, or tell you if they're not necessarily meeting the deadline that week, it might be pushed to next week. Just make sure that you're staying on top of both the big things and the small things, to make sure that it's all coming together within the timeline that you're working with. And having this good back and forth relationship with the developer is not only to stay on top of them, but it's also to anticipate when there will be delays and when there will be changes, which is inevitable. You can never expect everything to go smoothly. There might be illnesses, there might be technical glitches that nobody could have foreseen. There might be a misunderstanding of the scope of certain functionalities. Maybe the developers thought it would be a quick fix, but it turns out there's a lot more to it. And this will cause delays. But if you have a good open communication channel with your developers, then you will know this quite early on, and you'll be able to manage the expectations of your stakeholders. So your direct line managers or your future users, will be able to let them know when they might have to expect some changes or some delays. And you can tell them this in a timely manner, which is a very good position to be in. And lastly, when things start being delivered, you'll be the one that have to start testing it, or you might have a pool of users who can start testing it. And then it's very good for you to be clear on what it is that the different functionalities are meant to be doing. So when you click a button, you need to know where that button is meant to take you, because it could very easily have been rerouted to the wrong page. The developers might not be aware of that, because there might have been a misunderstanding. There might have been some mistake in the back end. And it's better for you to notice those mistakes so they can fix before you deliver it to your users. And I've also said check that spelling. and that's just from personal experience, is that the text that is on the website, it might be very niche to our sector. So there are many words and phrases we use that others aren't very familiar with. In general, not every person is a comms person. Not every person has English as their first language, or French, or whichever language you create your platform in. So it's good to make sure that you double check and triple check these things, so that when you do go live, it looks the best it can. Which would bring us to rollout. So there we go. So with the rollout, it'd be good if you decide how you're launching. And this can be impacted by the time limitations. So for us, we needed something to be up and running by a certain date. And because we were in a bit of a rush, we weren't able to build everything for that date, but we could build quite a lot of the website for that date. So what we did was a phased launch where key functionalities were in place, and then we kept adding. So that's one way to do it. If you have some more time, you might be able to completely finish your website for a better phase where you have a core group of sort of early adopters and users that can start using it before you go fully live. And that way you might be able to work out some kinks and issues before you launch it to the wider public. But this does usually require you to have some more time for this period. Or you could also finish it completely and do a big hurrah launch and spend a lot of sort of resources and energy of making this big splash. So there's different ways of doing it, and different things work for different people. And it's really just going with what works best for your needs. So before you do your big splash or your phased splash, it's usually a good idea to identify the early adopters or champion users. So with a website, it's very rare that you'll get a big audience and a big usership right off the bat. And you might need to identify those key people in different organizations or countries or projects that can start using it early on. These could be people who have a special interest in websites, or who are really excited about the projects, or who are just very good at stakeholder management and getting people engaged. So then they can champion it for you. Also know where your content is coming from. This depends on what sort of site you're using or creating, obviously, but is it curated? Do you need people to provide it? All of these things are good to have in place. And just know that it is hard to get people to use a website. We found that it's a lot of a bigger challenge than building a website, and we'd never done it before, the building part. So we thought that was the biggest challenge, but getting people to actually use it properly is hard, and it's continued work. So you have to figure out what kind of marketing is appropriate for you, what kind of training is appropriate or necessary. And what we have found as successes for our learning platform was having our team on the ground in many of the project countries, and they were then able to engage their stakeholders directly. Whereas some of the challenges we had, which others might experience and others might not, depending on what kind of site they're using, is that we had no mandate to make people use it, which if you're creating a website for maybe an organization, that could be a pull. But for us, that was not. So we'll look a bit more about things around these later. But now what I'm interested in is see how, if this compares at all with what Sana experienced with their digital research center in Pakistan. or if they had completely different challenges and successes. Sana, are you with us?
Yes, Ida, I'm with you.
Great. So do you want to take over and tell us a bit about the Digital Resource Centre?
Thank you, Ida. During your presentation, I just realized that it was very nostalgic. Since we have experienced same things here in Pakistan while developing this Digital Humanitarian Resource Center. Before going direct to Digital Humanitarian Resource Center, I would like to give a brief introduction of NHN. Can we move to the next slide? NHN is a volunteer network of 172 local national organizations. They are the member of the network, but only the organizations who are focused on humanitarian and DRR or DRM sector. NHN is very much focused to act as an independent and vibrant voice and to engage with stakeholders for promotion of humanitarian values by influencing policies and building capacities. And altogether, we are striving for effective and accountable humanitarian governance system in Pakistan. For rest of the details, you can check our website. The link is shared on this slide. NHN foresees visible, conducive interaction, enhancing humanitarian space as a catalyst, and overall one collaborative humanitarian window. And by following all three areas, you can see that we have targeted this at in our Digital Humanitarian Resource Center, and we tried to cover each and every aspect of our vision. So what led NHN to build DRC? Before initiating this process, we conducted a small survey here in Pakistan just to analyze that whether such platform exists in Pakistan or not, and what are the interests and needs and requirements of humanitarian sector along with the general public. So after analyzing all those points, we realized that there is the unavailability of one humanitarian platform for local, especially, then national and international, and general public at large. To create an archive of humanitarian material developed by humanitarian partners. This was basically personally experienced that whenever we are going to initiate any activity or any project within the NHN mandate, it was very difficult to get relevant information. There was no such archive available where you can find a document. So to develop DRC, one of the aspect was to create an archive of humanitarian material, which will help all humanitarian partners existing within the country and within the region as well, to reach humanitarian partners in a cost-effective way. It's very difficult for the organizations who are based in remote areas of Pakistan to get updated information or to attend the events or activities planned on the other part of the country. So this was also one of the points that in a cost-effective way, how to reach humanitarian partners, organizations, local humanitarian actors. So this was also one of the perspective which led NHN to build Digital Humanitarian Resource Center. And overall, it was the purpose of DRC is to galvanize communication through Digital Resource Center as one humanitarian window to address humanitarian information needs within the country, within the region, and globally. And though this is the NHN initiative, but we claim and we say that this is not NHN Digital Resource Center. Every single partner, every single actor should own it, and they should take it as their own platform. At the start, just one point left. In the last slide, there was the target audience for DRC was primarily local national civil society, humanitarian stakeholders, and general public at large, because we feel that academia, media, these are the all sectors which also required humanitarian information to address their targets. So this platform will be very useful for those sectors. NHN plan and process to build a digital resource center. This was the dream project of NHN, and NHN Central Executive Committee, which is the board of this network, perceived the idea, and NHN National Secretariat processed it. We are very grateful. Shifting the Power project, one of the initiative of Start Network, who budgeted this resource center, and they were very supportive in terms of establishment of resource center. Yes, there are some budget limitations in terms of like NHN limitized the web space and webinar tools because of the budget constraint. As Ida mentioned in her presentation, that we perceive during initiating the ideas, we perceive some points, but when we are practically implementing it, then we realize that how far we can go. So this was one of the aspects which we faced. Launch after development of interface, Digital Resource Center was launched in bilateral sessions, meetings, and NHN events. We have not launched it in a huge gathering, but we conducted sessions and we oriented our partners in different events and different meetings, not even the NHN events, but also the partners events, and we introduced it and among the humanitarian partners existing in Pakistan. Humanitarian partners are being oriented on the usage and benefits of DRC, that how they can access it, how they can use it, and how they themselves can upload the information on it and get benefit from DRC. Simultaneously, additional sections are being developed as the needs are identified. Like, yes, the interface was developed, and it was we introduced it, we oriented the stakeholders, but as we are moving ahead and we are analyzing that, okay, this is the need of our audience, so we are adding some sections as per the needs of audience. Challenges and solutions in getting people to use it. Just the brief overview of the challenges and solutions were over this a year period when we launched it, and we are linking it with the partners. Publicizing the DRC, this was the biggest challenge for us, and we to cater this challenge, we adopted several means of national, international partners. We oriented stakeholders. We gave presentation times in informal gatherings. We informed the stakeholders about DRC. Lack of commitment from experts on a volunteer basis, as we mentioned that. Earlier, when we created the platform, our intentions were that voluntarily people should get engaged with the platform, and they should own it. But during the implementation time, we feel that there is a lack of commitment, especially from the expert side. They're not giving their time, and they're not benefiting the platform with their expertise on a volunteer basis. So to address this, with provision of on-Ruria. At beginning, less acceptance to online sessions, webinars from local national humanitarian partners. And as I shared with you earlier, that we have 172 member organizations across Pakistan, and especially because we developed this DRC and we were targeting the local organizations of Pakistan, so there was a less acceptance from them. they are not familiar with these all online sessions, webinars, and such opportunities, and they were less interested in such opportunities. Rather, they were used to prefer the classroom environment. But our regular persuasion and positive feedback and word of mouth build their confidence on this mode of training or sessions. And now, thankfully, there is a large acceptance to DRC. And one of the biggest success is that NHN succeeded to train organizations in remote areas who have limited resources and training opportunities, like in FATA, in the remote areas of Balochistan, in the remote areas of Sindh. Now they are being oriented, and they are approaching NHN, and even they are sharing their needs, that what other training calendar should be, and how we should proceed with these things. Okay, this is the interface of NHN Resource Center, and from here I would like to request my fellow colleague Mohammed Humayun to click the link and to give you a brief insight of DRC. Humayun.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you for the presentation. Can I request for the screen share, please? This is just the interface that you are looking at. This is a picture. And,
share the screen yourself. Are you able to do that on Zoom? So you can choose share.
Right.
Is that possible for you? Or I could click the link myself, Mohammed. Do that. If it will let me, actually, it might not.
Yes, if you can, please.
Yeah. I'm having a bit of a slow internet connection up here.
Thank you, because it's not letting me.
Let's see if it will allow us. But Sana, I really want to thank you for that presentation. Like you say, I can understand what you mean when you said it was nostalgic to listen to, because there's quite a lot of similarities between what you guys have experienced in Pakistan and what we experience on the international level, especially, like you said, around actually getting audience engagement and launching the website, and how that is actually a very difficult thing to do. I'm really sorry this is taking so long. We're not having the greatest internet up here, it looks like. So getting onto the website is being harder than I expected.
I'll just give you a brief overview from here on then. Basically, this resource center is not just a learning platform. What we aimed was that we wanted to combine a lot of aspects, from including creating a library or giving information to the latest to our users about the latest updates in the humanitarian section in Pakistan and across the region. So if you see this, we have a small section of library at the start, and then we also have a section which says like the map on the in the icon, and basically, in fact, we are doing it that we have tried to make a database of all the resources and human resources, including and other humanitarian resources that our members have, and we tried to plot it on the map where they are present in location wise. So what we are trying to do is like to assess that what kind of emergency resources are available at different sectors, different
Mohammed, we seem to be losing
different districts. Okay, so during an emergency, And then we had this actors database. This is linked to our roster that we are and TSCP. And this roster is hosting the competent people from all over Pakistan. This is going to be a national roster. So we are currently in the development phase of this roster. And then we also have this webinars and tools. And in this section in the webinars and the trainings, what we do is the trainings that we conduct and the webinars that we do, we record in those webinars and trainings, and we place them in this section so that people who haven't been able to the people who haven't been able to connect live, they can view it later on. Plus we have a section for the forum for discussion, general discussions, and a blog. Plus we also have a section for grant opportunities, which we can create, which we update regularly whenever we see and receive any grant opportunities from other partners, or there are open grant opportunities. So we place it over here. And then we also have a section where we have the links to other external portals that are available in Pakistan and in the region or in worldwide. And plus at the end, we have some models and approaches. These are the approaches that during project implementations, people that they have been using those models and the learnings and case studies, so they are available here. So this is just a brief overview. I will just leave it to you to explore it further. The link is on the left, so you can have a look. So thank you. I think the time has gone up, so I will pass over to you, Eda, again.
Thank you very much for that, Mohammed. And yeah, I really do encourage you to go and take a look at the site. Unfortunately, our internet up here wouldn't allow us to access it, but I have tried it before, and it's usually very easy to access. So before we take some questions from you guys, I would like Sana and me to just sum up with a few recommendations. Sort of like the top line of what we would want you to remember if you're embarking on this process yourself. So firstly, I would say identify the needs and requirements of your audience. So do a proper value proposition before you start. Do we have Sana with us?
Before you start, please do the research of other existing platforms.
And like Sana said, definitely do this to avoid duplication. And don't be afraid to change your plan or assumption if you see that somebody else has already done what you were planning to do.
As I mentioned, that do the research, so also identify gaps and limitations in what already exists.
And when you've done that, you can decide on your USP, so your unique selling point.
And give ample time for building and testing.
Know your limitations.
Be prepared to compromise.
And like I said, don't be afraid to micromanage your developers.
To your needs.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Sana? I think we lost you for a second.
Okay. Host on a dedicated server if possible and suitable to your needs and requirements.
What you build, keep it simple and user-friendly.
Engage relevant partners early for feedback and suggestions.
And spread the words by using all means available to you. As we said, this is quite a tricky part.
Hold seminars or orientation sessions if possible to get them familiar with the platform.
And contextualize it where possible so that it is suitable for your audience.
Last but not least, don't give up.
So we don't have much time left. So I would ask you guys if you have any questions, either to Sana, myself, or both of us. It would be great to hear from you. You could either, like I said, you could either type it in the chat, or you could unmute yourself or raise a hand and ask us any questions you may have. Put myself on mute. We got a question from Eva Livingston Jones here. And I'd like if you could start with answering that, Sana. When you were exploring sort of what the needs of the users were, was there anything that really surprised you?
Basically most of the people shared that they are familiar with such platforms, and when we have requested them for the needs and we analyzed their needs, we realized that people want to get the updated information, and they don't have any such reliable resource or source center from where they can. And the most important thing was such type of information from one platform. So that was really a surprising thing, that whatever we were perceiving, that was proved by the analysis and the survey which we conducted.
Thank you, Sana. So I think we had some similar experience as well. Like, one of the things that early on we realized when talking to our prospective users from the different countries and regions that the DEP program is working in is that it wasn't so much getting access to the reports and things like that they were very concerned about, but it was more not knowing what was going on in the different countries or even within their own projects in their own country, because it was hard to figure out who was doing what and who was working on what project, which is why we very much changed our scope, and it became closer to more of a networking platform, as well as a repository of learning where you can actually have registered and identified users, and you can connect with them and chat with them directly, and find which country or project or program or organization that they're linked to. So that was one of the things that we weren't really planning to do at all, but after talking to people, that was something that stood out as a great need. So thank you, Emma. If there are no other questions, I think I have one for Sana, actually. So obviously we've built two quite different platforms, one with a very national focus and one with a very global focus. Can I ask you, in your opinion, what do you think are the benefits and also the limitations of a national platform, and the same for a global platform?
Basically, if we are analyzing the national platform, so in my opinion, the benefit will be that people are at ease with the contextualized learning and mode of communication, and people can relate to the example and case studies presented in a contextualized way. And the limitation for the national audience is that international trends and learnings are not passed on to locals. could be overcome by engaging international speakers or through locals who have global exposure. And simultaneously, if we see the global audience perspective, and then the benefits and the limitations are that good for pursuing and disseminating global trends and approaches, which will also develop the connectivity and collaboration elements, will be a benefit. And the limitation could be that the global platform is not contextualized, and could be the challenge.
I think those are both very fair points, and I think this is something, we're running out of time here, so I think this is something that we will definitely encourage to continue discussion in sort of the online forums. Actually, it could work on both our platforms, actually. So I want to thank you very much, Sana, for your presentation and engagement, and also Mohammed for your short demo of the platform. And of course, thank you, all of you guys, for joining this webinar today. Yeah.
We providing such opportunities for civil society across the globe, and this was really a good thing. And by taking the benefit of this webinar, of today's webinar on DRC, and hopefully that you all will get connected with us through DRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sana. And we'll definitely try and help with that. So this webinar has been recorded. We will post that together with the presentation, where you have the link to the Digital Resource Center as well. We will post that all on the website, and we will email you all guys later so that you have access to this material. If you have any questions, or like I said, if you want to continue any of these discussions in the online forum, then that is definitely something we encourage you guys to do. If you have any questions after, then feel free to share them with myself and Sana, and I'll make sure that all questions are passed on. So thank you guys very much.